This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories.
A band of pirates go and attack a transport ship to steal its cargo. The pirates go and board the shuttle, quickly eliminating all opposing forces, and outside of the ship they go and disable its blaster cannons. The captain, Silvo, enters the captured ship and begins to interrogate a crew member, demanding for him to open the vault. The crew member tells him that there are no credits aboard the ship, and the captain says that he is clearly lying. He then orders for him to be executed as his crew goes and cuts down the door. He begins to go and tell them that he knows that they're losing faith in him, but hopefully that this haul will be able to go and make up for things and ultimately will restore their faith in him. His second in command, Brutus, enters into the vault and finds there is only a single credit in there and that the crew member was telling the truth. Silvo is then turned on by his crew as Brutus leads a mutiny against him. Across the galaxy, a young boy named Wim plays with a Jedi and Sith toy as his father, Wendell, calls for him to come down and get ready for school. Wim comes down and his father tells him how he'll be busy for the next few days and gives him a good amount of credits to be able to pay for his meals for the next few days. He also tells Wim to make sure he is not late for school, and Wim confirms that he won't be. While waiting for their bus, Wim meets up with his friend Neil, and the two have a pretend lightsaber fight until some kids begin to tease them, and shortly after the bus arrives. Getting on board, Wim looks out and sees two girls upon a speeder, and instead of following the bus towards the school, they jump over a barrier, and he wonders why they do this. Once he arrives at school, he does see them and realizes they took some kind of shortcut. At school, Wim begins to draw an image of a Jedi, and while the droid teaches, a woman walks in and sees him. He quickly turns off the desk he has and goes to watch her presentation. She reveals her name is Undersecretary Farah, and she tells them that they have a very important exam that comes up tomorrow, and that this exam will determine their future. Wim is surprised by this and begins to ask Neil about it. Neil points out that Wim isn't paying attention very well since everyone has been studying for these exams, and how could he not know what's going on? Their attention is called back to the presentation as Undersecretary Farah begins to ask them what career they would like to have. Most of the kids begin to answer more normal careers for this world, but then she decides to call on Wim specifically, and he begins to explain how he wants a job where he could help people but also have a little bit of adventure. The rest of the kids begin to make fun of him, and when they get out of class, Neil begins to ask Wim why he said he wanted to become a Jedi. Wim said that he didn't, and Neil said, yeah, you basically did. You just described what a Jedi was. The two friends then go and return home. Meanwhile, the other two girls that Wim saw earlier, named Fern and KB, go to return home on their speeder and quickly realize that it is damaged. They have to walk the rest of the way, and when returning to KB's house, she's able to tell Fern that it has a damaged part and that they would need to find a new one to be able to use it. Quickly after that, a few kids come by and begin to taunt them, saying that their speeder is damaged and they won't be able to race on the weekend. Fern then goes and responds back that it'll be fixed by them and they will be able to win this race. KB then begins to ask her why she did this, but Fern just says that it's important to her and has to get back home. After she gets home, she goes and overrides one of her mother's droids to make it think that she has been home all this time and she's just been upstairs studying. Her mother, who is Undersecretary Farah, then goes up to her, and Fern acts as if she was upstairs studying and was just coming down quickly. She begins to talk to her and tells her daughter that she is back at the top of her class and to make sure she stays there because on their planet, not everyone could make it into government and higher levels of society, and that she needs to make sure that she gets up there and stays there. Meanwhile, Wim is at home and is actually studying for the exams on the next day, and his father returns and begins to talk to him about it. He quickly tests him after Wim asks him to, and Wendell then goes and puts his son into his bed, and Wim asks if he could read him a story like his mother used to. His father says he doesn't have time and that he's getting a little old for stories. Wim is left in his room, and because he can't fall asleep, he goes and begins to look at his data pad, which he left under his pillow, and he looks at different stories of Jedi. The next morning, he did wake up late and was not able to make it to the bus. He decides to go and take that shortcut he saw the girls taking the day before. Grabbing his speeder, he goes and pushes it over the barrier and continues in. At school, Neil notices that Wim hasn't made it and wonders where he is and tries to ask what would happen if a kid misses the exam, but the droids in charge of their education just tell him to be quiet and get ready for the test. Wim, trying to take the shortcut, takes a wrong turn and is led to a massive ravine where he tries to stop his speeder, but sadly isn't able to do it in time, where he tumbles off and makes it to the bottom of it. He realizes there is some kind of hatch down there, but a droid patrolling the area does find him and says that he is skipping school and needs to come with him. Wim then goes to ask how is he supposed to get out of there, and the droid is able to get him out and brings him back to the school, where he waits outside the office, and Fern also is waiting there. She says she's there because the droids don't like her, but Wim really doesn't believe her. Soon his father walks out of the office and begins to scold him for skipping this test and that he shouldn't have done it. He has been able to convince them to give him one last chance, but he's going to have points removed from it, and because of that, he has to get a perfect score to be able to pass it. Wim then begins to tell his father that it's not important and that he believes he found a Jedi temple out in the woods. His father, getting more and more furious, tells him that it doesn't matter to go home and study now, and he isn't to investigate this at all. Fern, overhearing this, begins to ask him if it's true he found it, and Wim tries to lie, but Fern does not believe him. Instead of doing what his father said, Wim decides to go to Neil's house and asks his younger siblings where he is. They point up, and Wim goes up to the top of the house where Neil is taking a bath, and he is just surprised that his friend is just standing there above his bathroom. They then go to the area that Wim found, and he gives Neil some rope and tells him to hold on to it and to try and support his weight. But since they are both kids and not strong enough to do it, when Wim begins to go down, his weight pulls his friend down, and both Wim and Neil are pulled to the bottom. They go to the location of the hatch, but learn that the girls have found it first. Wim and Fern begin to argue, and they go and try to do this a more civilized ways to kids, where whoever calls it first gets to claim this as their own, and in this game, Fern is able to do it first. She then goes and plays a little prank on the boys, and after they get a little annoyed with her, they go and make a deal where Fern tells them if they are able to go and dig this out, that they could go and explore the inside with them. Meanwhile, Wendell returns home and goes to talk to Wim, but quickly realizes he isn't home and heads out to find him. The two boys go and talk about how the girls are so dumb because they didn't claim the inside of the ship and only the outside, as the girls talk about how the guys are so dumb because they are doing all the hard manual labor for them. But KB does point out that she's being a little mean and that Wim did find this and it really should be his since he discovered it. But they quickly end this conversation as they go and uncover the port to enter the ship into. KB uses some of the technology attached to her goggles to go and force the door open, and the kids go and enter into the mysterious location. As Wim's father begins to get closer and closer to them, calling out for Wim, the kids go to hide inside of it since none of them has any desire for someone to learn where this secret location is yet. They find some old disabled droid and Neil bumps into it slightly, which has it pulled on a switch it was in the process of pulling. That switch goes and locks the door they came into, and they are trapped inside of it. But being able to use some basic logic, KB is able to figure out where the power line leading to the door is and follows it to the ship's power generator so they can go and restart it to be able to send power to the door so they can open it. Just wanting to go back home, Neil goes with the girls. Wim does feel a little betrayed and decides to go off on his own to explore this area. The girls find the reactor and manage to restart it after hitting it a few times. And Wim, exploring around, realizes that this is a ship and it has made it to the cockpit. He goes to tell Neil, but the girls grab the communicator and tell him not to touch anything. Wim ignores them and presses a green button that was flashing, which causes everything to begin to go crazy. As they try to escape, the droid that was previously disabled does turn back on, and before they can make it out, they realize that the ship has already begun to take off. Wendell goes and sees that his son is aboard the ship as it begins to fly away and correct its orientation since when it did crash, it was upside down. Wim looks at him and he is nearly knocked out and hangs from the side as the other kids manage to pull him back up. Wendell watches as the ship begins to fly out of the planet's atmosphere, and once they reach space, the kids all look out and are surprised since they have never seen space before or stars. They then begin to blame Wim for everything that has happened and try to shut down the ship, but are not able to in time as the ship jumps to hyperspace. The kids try to disable the hyperdrive, but are not able to. Luckily for them, the ship is able to drop out of hyperspace on its own since it is so old the ship wasn't able to stay in for too long. Fern goes and directly tells Wim not to do anything else, and that both her and everyone else blames him for the situation they are now in. They go around the ship to try and figure out if they can find their way back to their homeworld, but are quickly confronted by the droid as it begins to march towards them. The droid says that they are stowaways and that they need to be brought to the captain. They try to reason with it, saying that the captain is dead and there is no captain. The droid says that that is impossible, that a ship must always have a captain. And Fern goes and declares that she is the captain and that she killed the previous captain. This gets the droid to listen to her and acknowledges her as the new captain. The droid reveals its name is SM-33, and that it needs to go from a lot of repairs to the ship. It recommends going to a port, but the kids say no and that they need to return to their home world of At-Aten. The droid says that it has no memory of that planet in its database and begins to list out every planet it knows that starts with the letter A. They say not to do that and just go back to its last known location in its database, but the droid doesn't have that information either. So the kids decide that they will go to this port that the droid spoke of and be able to get information there, as the droid could do repairs. So they tell SM-33 to go and do that. He does so, and the ship jumps to hyperspace once more. Back on At-Aten, Wendell finds droids that are investigating what is going on. They ask him why he's there, and he begins to explain that his kid and 3 others were taken away on a ship that left the planet. The droid says that this is impossible, that no ships are allowed to go to or leave the planet. And Wendell goes and begs for their help. The droids just simply tell him to come with them. Returning to the ship, Wim is investigating an area where Neil comes to him. He shows him the corpses of the members of the original crew of the ship, and it seems that 2 of them died in a duel, most likely to become the new captain. Wim then goes and shows Neil everything inside of the captain's quarters and says this is a really cool place and a place he could see them staying for a while, and this could be a lot of fun. Neil points out that it isn't, and he just wants to return home, and that they're going to be in a lot of trouble when they get back. Wim does listen to his friend, but is excited to go and do this and have a great adventure, as they're just having a normal life at home. SM-33 brings them to the port he spoke of, and parks the ship outside of it because it is too large to land in there. SM-33 says that he will work on repairs to the ship as the kids go to the port on a small transport to be able to get the information they need. Wim goes and pays their driver with some of the credits his father gave him. He then goes and hides the rest of the credits to make sure that no one steals them from him. The kids begin to walk around, and although Fern says for them to stay together while looking at a certain type of club, she notices that the rest of the kids have left her. She quickly finds KB again, and before they could do anything, a woman pulls them to the side and saying this is not a safe place for kids, and says for some credit she could help them get back home, and asks where they're from. When they say they're from At-Aten, she says to tell them where they're seriously from. The boys go to look around for information and find a place where they could eat. They order their food and are disgusted by what they get, but they still do pay for it. And the chef begins to question them how they managed to get mint condition Republic credits, and Neil points out that Wim's father gave it to him to pay for lunch. Everyone there begins to suddenly be interested in them and wanting to get the credits from them. Wim pushes his food into the stove and it creates a massive blast of fire, which leaves as a distraction to escape. Meanwhile, the woman talking to the girls continues to question where they're actually from, and when they say they are really from At-Aten, she says that it is impossible, that At-Aten isn't a real place and is only a place of myth where there is great treasure. They are then cut off as the boys return and they mention what's going on. They all run and are quickly surrounded by pirates. Fern uses the blaster she took from the ship to go and try and threaten the pirates, but one of them manages to easily take it from her and turns it on her. Then SM-33, returning to the port, goes and begins to attack the pirates. He easily starts to eliminate them, blocking blaster fire with shield built on his arms and using them to knock people down. He then leads the kids back to the way they came in, and they begin to question him why he took them to a pirate port, and he says because they're all pirates, when they begin to say they're just kids and they just want to go home. He is quickly taken out by the pirates, and they begin to surround the kids. The pirates begin to interrogate them and ask where they got this from and where they're from. The kids say that they'll cooperate, but the pirates say that they need to spend a few days in the brig to make sure that they're going to be telling the truth. In the brig, the kids try to plan a way to escape, and at first they try to use the small creature that has been living in SM-33 to try and train it to go and bring the key to them, but that does fail. A mysterious stranger that is towards the back of the cell says he can't help them escape, and they ask him how. He just says he's going to get the key. He then begins to use the Force and brings the key to him. As Wim says that he is a Jedi, the man steps forward and pulls down his hood to reveal who he is to the kids.
Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, check out the video on screen, and may the Force be with you.